Thanks. Welcome, everyone. I think we're both very excited to be with you this afternoon. What I'd like to do just briefly is kind of talk about Huck and his work, his inspirations, and then we'll go on to the medium of woodcut. Then we'll look at some of the works that are in the show as well as some that are not. And all the while we'll be talking back and forth, hopefully not offending each other.
No.
We'll see. So here's an image of Huck in his studio, right, Evil Prince in St. Louis. The woodcut that you see in the background is the central panel of Electric Bologna Land in the exhibition downstairs. I wanted to talk a little bit about the medium of woodcut. I'm sure many of you, probably most of you, are quite familiar with it. But I just wanted to get a sense from Huck about what it's like to actually carve. I've heard a quote from you before, and you said, "The blank fights you. It doesn't want to be carved. It doesn't want to be gouged." Could you talk a little bit about that?
It's hard to do. I use the fruit hardwoods, mostly always cherry, and the woodcut is an inherently expressive art form, and by that I mean God or Martians or whatever didn't make trees for us to carve the four horsemen of the apocalypse out of. So when you do your drawing on the block and then you carve out that drawing, it fights you. It's hard to do. And so what happens is that fight, the summary of that struggle to carve the image in there results in a really expressive image. And Dürer's prints are just as expressive as German expressionist prints in their own way, because the nature of woodcut is it's a rough and splintery line. It may look fluid on the whole, but individually each line is rougher than any other kind of print line that you may have. It's different than an etching line. It's different than an engraved line. There's wood grain that's always there in some way.
Yeah, I want to look at a couple of the woodcuts that are in the show downstairs. These are very small woodcuts. These are two of Dürer's woodcuts from The Small Passion. It was a subject that he returned to over and over throughout his career, and I think that this idea of the wood sort of fighting you as you're trying to carve it is really reflected in his work from The Small Passion to The Large to the Apocalypse, also the work of some of his compatriots. And by that, I mean that it lends itself to this kind of grotesque, very visceral imagery, right? So on the left, you see the deposition, Christ's descent from the cross, and though you can't see the face of Christ, if you look just to the right, you can see the hat. Do you see sort of a skull shape there? Kind of indicating the idea of death without explicitly portraying the lifeless face. Likewise, the doubting Thomas, or Christ appearing to his disciples on the right, this really incredibly just grotesque thrusting of the hand into the wound on Christ's side. And here we also have one other print from the exhibition on the left, the crucifixion, and again, I think you can see this kind of garish, wounds, blood flowing into chalices. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at with this idea of the wood itself sort of giving the image its own personality. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, on this slide in particular, there are two images on here that are two in my top 10 favorite prints of all time. The one on the far right is by Balding. I'm blanking out. Birkmeyer, that's right, and I love Birkmeyer. Hans Birkmeyer, it's Two Lovers Surprised by Death. I mean, it's been titled different things. It's Lovers Surprised by Death. And the funny thing is, when I was a kid, I saw this image, and I'm a big fan of like heavy metal music and dark and lurid subject matter and the album covers that go along with that. And that It's the angel of death, man. And there's this band called Slayer, and their most famous song is Angel of Death. And like if they did a 7-inch re-release on vinyl of that as a single, they could take that image and put it on there, and it'd be like it was made today by an artist that they hired. You know, it's very, all this stuff is really contemporary. And in images like in the center panel, Witch's Sabbath by Balding, Balding Gruen, there's just something about the setup of the space, the dark subject matter, the virtuosity in which they're cut that got me at a really young age, especially with Dürer and the far left crucifixion. I actually, you don't know this, a little nugget for everyone here, and you're going to want a picture of this, and I totally forgot about it until right now. My dad is a bluegrass musician, and he has a bunch of fiddles, and when I was 13, he stripped down the back of one of his fiddles, and I drew that crucifixion on the back of the fiddle, and he had a guy come in and polish it over and that crucifixion's on my dad's #1 violin on the back of it. When I was like 13 or 14 or something, I did that. So there's 3 like huge prints to me in this one slide. I was just very influenced by this kind of work very early on.
And both of these, I didn't realize that Witch's Sabbath and Two Lovers Surprised by Death, same year. Of course, both chiaroscuro woodcuts, but I had no idea they were created in the same year. I love, and we'll see this in Huck's work too, the flowing of the smoke and the way it directs your eye around the print. I think that's something that Huck has really responded to, and we'll see that going forward in his work. Wanted to very quickly look at Dürer's Rhinoceros and Huck's Great Warmadillo, a chiaroscuro woodcut that was created as a tribute, right?
Yeah, I did this as a tribute to Dürer, but also there's a sort of parallel with immigration today. So I live near St. Louis, Missouri. My shop's in downtown St. Louis. And we folks in Missouri, we didn't have armadillos until 10 years ago. And because of climate change and whatever, they're making their way further north. And, you know, the only time we see these amazing creatures are dead on the side of the highway. And I see some parallel with, you know, the armadillos are just trying to come north. They're just trying to come to a better life. And so I saw that kind of a parallel there, and so I used it as a metaphor for the situation with immigration now. I think they're posthumous impressions of the rhinoceros that were done with a color block. In Dürer's day, it was released and published as a black and white print, but someone came along later and added a blue color. And I really like the blue color that's there as well. It's a chiaroscuro cut, which the large-scale woodcut in the gallery downstairs is Electric Bologna Land.
Could you just also give a little bit of an explanation for, you know, what a chiaroscuro woodcut is?
It's a 2-block print. So you have a highlight, you choose a color, that's a value all over is a background color. And then you carve the highlights out on that block. You print all of those in color, and then you take the key block, which is the black and white block, and you print it over the top of those colors. So you get a more three-dimensional effect. It's a Witch's Sabbath and Lovers Surprised by Death in the previous slides were chiaroscuro cuts. It's a really old-fashioned pictorial effect print. And that's my favorite. Okay, it's my favorite print of all time, the rhinoceros.
I was going to ask you that.
That's my favorite one. It goes back and forth between Night, Death, and the Devil by Dürer and the rhinoceros. And I think the thing about the rhinoceros, it has a presence to it. He's cute and cuddly, and it's done from Dürer's imagination. Dürer never saw a rhinoceros. The rhinoceros that's depicted here was supposed to be a gift to the emperor, Maximilian.
Maximilian, yeah.
And it was it was in a ship, and the ship sunk, and the rhinoceros drowned off the coast of Spain or something. And obviously, news traveled slower. There was no CNN, or Google News. And so Dürer got word of this and was really looking forward to seeing it in real life because he was close to the emperor, and decided to just do his version based on written description of a rhinoceros.
But I mean, how good is that?
That
From
is
a written
amazing.
description, it's incredible.
And so there's that story, and then this was an extremely popular print in its day when it was released because it's of the exotic. And I'm a big fan, as well as those prints that are about, monsters, from curious monsters and fanciful beasts, where people thought the earth was flat, which oddly enough, it's just like modern days now. People thought the earth was flat, and when you fell off the edge, what was there? And it was all these crazy monsters. So I love that stuff, and I have some of my monster prints here. The little affordables that I do are all based on creatures from the end of the world, basically apocalyptic monsters.
I didn't realize that. That's because Dürer, he loved the quote-unquote exotic. He loved newly discovered peoples and places and animals and plants. The rhinoceros is but one of his most well-known quotes from his diary after visiting the Netherlands. He came across a collection of things that Cortez had brought back from the New World, and it was Moteku Soma's headdress, and it was feather work, and it was these beautiful, beautiful objects, gold, silver, and he said, this is better than the prodigies. So this is something that he was really, really interested in, like this artwork, much better than those of his contemporaries. So I didn't realize that you had that monsters on the marginalia, medieval manuscripts kind of thing too.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
It's very contemporary. I mean, and also to a 13-year-old kid that likes knights, death and devils and apocalyptic imagery and dragons and all. A 13-year-old boy is going to love the work of Dürer. It's all very hardcore, cool stuff and subject matter. I mean, the plague years, I believe, man, I would have killed it in the plague years. I would have just totally cleaned house in the plague years. I mean, but it was good for some art. That's for sure. That dark humor, I guess, is one of the only ways to deal with such a thing.
Right. On that note, well, oh, sure, Frank.
Yeah, a chiaroscuro block is, you have, the way that it's done is I'll carve a block, the image in black and white.
Here, we'll go back to.
Yeah, go back.
Go back to the.
You carve a block in black and white, and then you do a print off of that, and you'll have a blank block the same exact size, and you take that wet print and you lay it down on the blank block, you run it through a press, it transfers the wet image onto the block, and then I'm looking at that, and I say, in the transferred image block, I'm like, there'll be a highlight here, a highlight there, a highlight there. I carve those out, then we print it in a color. Then you take the black block and you print it over the top of it. So you have two colors, and it's a visual trick that's early Renaissance, basically, I think, or just high Renaissance, whatever. That time period was this dimensional printmaking that they did.
Is it a reverse image?
They're both reverse.
So everything you do, you draw backwards?
I draw it all backwards.
We were just looking at cylinder seals down in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
2000 BC,
Uh-huh.
and they did that.
You draw it backwards. I can write sentences, and I can write all backwards. Yeah. It's just I've been training myself to do that I've trained myself to do it for 20 years. It's just like a thing.
It's a really, really hard thing to imagine for, those of us who aren't good printmakers at all, how you conceive of a composition in reverse. Now, Huck told me a couple days ago, it doesn't matter as long as you create a balanced composition. It doesn't matter what happens. It's always going to look good when it's reversed. But that just, my mind does not work that way.
I use a I was about to say, I use a Da Vinci Code in my picture making, but I do. I use either a square with a cross in it, a square with a circle with a triangle in it, or a triangle with a cross through it in a circle, or a square with an X with a circle with a triangle. That's how I set up my picture space. I'm always thinking of that. So, and I've studied these people for since I was actually 30 years, since I was a teenager, and I've read and read and read and read. And great picture makers study other great picture makers. That's the way it works. And great picture makers rip off other great picture makers. Old printmakers ripped each other off. Well, I love Leonardo da Vinci, and the greatest painter of all time. And you know, he knew how to set up space really well. Dürer knew how to set up space really well, better than really well. They're masters at it. Michelangelo's the same. But I also like the German Expressionists, and I like Picasso. I like all great picture making is balanced.
That's what's so great about your work too, is that you can see these inspirations. You can see the knowledge of the history of art that you have, and that's one of my favorite things about your work, is just how you can see these things blended in. So these two prints are both in the show downstairs from Huck's first sort of widely acclaimed, I would say, series, 2 weeks in August, 14 Rural Absurdities. I love both of these two prints very much.
I have one here. I have the last one.
No, Exhuming Moses.
I have the last Exhuming Moses that's
well,
available.
that was a good plug then. For
Yeah.
Exhuming Moses.
One. After 25 years, I have one left.
When you mentioned just a few minutes ago about making art as a sort of as a method of survival, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the subject matter of these prints. I know that, they're derived, as much of your work is, from your hometown of Potosi, Missouri. It's a tiny, tiny town. As of the last census, I think it was 2,600 people total population.
15,000 if you count the prison there.
If you count the prison. And so, as a, kind of burgeoning artist, trying to make images, what was that like? And how has it influenced it?
I grew up in Potosi, Missouri, and it's a dead American town. It's unfortunate. It's very sad. Now, if you go to downtown Potosi, there's nothing but payday loan places, and that's all it is. There used to be Brown Shoe Company used to be there, and Purcell Tire. They've both left. This is the way it is now, and it's extremely sad. However, not to defend that too much, there are crazy things that go on in secluded places like that, okay? And it doesn't have anything to do with the economics, okay? It's just there's some like cabin fever that goes on in rural America that's a little bit different than what goes on in New York City. And I always saw the humor in it. Early on, I based this whole set of prints called 2 Weeks in August on events that happened in my hometown that I had heard about, that I had witnessed, or that was told to me by my dad, who's the town doctor, okay? Because he hears all the stories. And so I had all these images in my head for years, and when it came time to make art that was mature and about me and honest, I chose to go and make work about where I'm from, because it's me. And so these stories just came out over this 3-year period, and there was a little bit of trouble. Whenever I got a little well known for it, it was in the paper in St. Louis. There was a show at the museum in St. Louis right away. And they did big interviews with me, and some of these people were still alive. They had families there, and somebody threw a water bottle at my sister, going to the florist one day. I heard about this happening. It was the curator of prints called me in the middle of the night before the show was going up, Francesca
I was about to read
who's
a quote.
this amazing was this. She passed away this year. She was this amazing print curator. For one of the first that saw anything in my work. She called me in the middle of the night. She was like, Tom, these Southeast Missourians, do they really like to burn buildings down? Because, I named names in this interview I gave, and she was worried that there was going to be the mob outside with, and I was thinking, this is great, and she was very scared, but they didn't know, nothing happened, everything smoothed over, and then the work got a lot of attention, and I've moved on from the hillbillies doing crazy stuff to there's still hillbillies in there doing things. It's just they tend to follow a certain political agenda these days, and I want to make as much fun of everybody as I possibly can. And it's more steeped in metaphor and allegory and a broader based social commentary and criticism than 20 years ago.
Well, I still think that that's there.
I know you always say that.
I have said this 3 times.
It's still there.
It is still there.
Yeah, there's some hillbilly. There is.
So one of the things that I've pointed out every time I talk about the print on the left, Kohler City Revisited, is just the way the composition's built. It's very similar to the way Dürer built his compositions, either on a pretty hard diagonal or in an S shape, in order to lead your eye around the print. And this is done brilliantly in both of these prints. I love Kohler City Revisited because it takes this very strange form of dentures and builds an entire image around that. And you move through the image based on dentures, piles of dentures, and the tone is created that way.
Does anybody want to know why?
Oh, yeah. So, here's some piles of dentures.
I'll tell you why.
Oh, yeah, we'll get
So
that.
I was 5, 6 years old. My mom went to this rummage store, like a thrift store. This is probably 1976, 77. She took me to this thrift store called Kohler City, and they had great, used toys, used clothes. They had canned goods, but jar canned goods. And they sold barrels of used dentures. And I remember seeing this old guy go up to the pile, and I'm 5, and I'm like, that guy's messed up, And he gets up there, and he's like, and he takes the teeth, and he tries them on, and he's like, yeah, and he puts them back in the pile. And nobody believed me. For years and years and years and years, even after I did this print, and it's been in museums, and it's been sold all over the world and everything, no one believed me. And then there's a book called Weird Missouri that came out. And they did a feature on Kohler City in there. And I was like, see, I told you. And people are like, what? Somebody tagged me online in it. It's true, And then I was like, and then I sold the print out. That print sat, I had 10 of them left. And over a year, they finally sold,
After the book came out?
After the Weird Missouri book came out. That's a long time ago now. That's probably 10, 12 years ago that book came out.
We live in Georgia. We believe it.
It happens. It happens, man. Weird stuff happens everywhere. Everywhere. Everywhere I go, I'll see something crazy. I don't know what I've seen down here yet. Probably something I could think of,
Yeah, if we thought hard enough, I'm sure we could come up with something.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so but the piles that we're talking about, you can see them here.
And it's up down in the gallery.
Oh, yeah, it's in the gallery too. And then this lower section here, just yeah, I think the battery's almost dead. There we go.
It's hard to see.
It's hard to see it on there.
That's why it's green. It should be red.
Can you see my cursor? Oh, there we go. So here are some piles that I was talking about, and back here, and then down here as well. I love this print so much because of the story that I have read that Tom has told us today, because it gives you an idea of a child, this kind of fascinated but also repulsed sort of experience. You're seeing something that's very grotesque, but yet, you're also drawn to it in some way that it comes back out.
I get a lot of
this
flack.
form.
I still get a lot of flack that I depict this stuff. And I'm kind of, the way I've come to defend it is if don't do bad shit and you won't end up in my shit. Don't misbehave and I won't make a print about you. And so, for a while, like when I would go back to Potosi, there'd be like, I'd go to like Casey's General Store to get like a Coke or something, and they'd know who I am. And I'd go up there and they'd be like, here is your Coke, Mr. Huck. Or that will be, they're real like, don't do anything weird, I'm in that way, I'm like Hogarth. I'm not a moralist, but I'm like, I want to hold a mirror up to society and say, look at how screwed up we are.
Yeah, and the curator that he mentioned earlier, Francesca Consagra, she had such a great quote that I read. It was about her having acquired 2 weeks in August, and she was about to display it. And she said she starts worrying because it's depicting people in the area. Well, here, I'll read it to you. We had to consider the fact that most of the people depicted in the work live in the area and that some might take offense at his characterizations. I felt as if I was a curator in London during the 1730s, ready to display Hogarth's work to the public. I loved that
That's
quote.
awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
How long does it take you to make all those little cuts?
The one in the studio, in the gallery downstairs, Electric Bologna Land took 4 years.
And we'll see Electric Bologna Land here in just a second.
That's every day.
Oh.
I carve every day about 7 or 8 years. 7 or 8 years. 7 or 8 hours a day.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about we had a question about exhuming Moses. As I understand it, and we can do it in brief, Moses Austin, father of Stephen Austin of Texas
Very
fame.
good.
Right. And but Moses, founder of Potosi?
His father
Okay.
founded Potosi. So there's this Potosi, Austin, Texas connection. It's a way bigger deal for the people in Potosi than it is for Austin. Except there was a historical society in Austin, Texas that in the 1940s that wanted to see if they could exhume Moses Austin and have him buried in Austin, Texas, the father of Stephen Austin. Okay, Potosi wouldn't give him up. Wouldn't do it. The Moses Austin Historical Society wouldn't do it. And so they sent 2 people to rob the grave. And the little old lady was walking her dog in the evening, and their guy's digging him up. And they called the sheriff. Plan was foiled. Crime was foiled, And I heard this story growing up over and over and over. And now, if you go there, they have a thing over the grave, and they've built. They've got this whole dome, concrete dome over it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And while we're still on this print,
They have my set of prints. 2 weeks in August now. Now they're okay with it. There's the Moses Austin Historical Society Museum in the graveyard, the St. James Cemetery, where Moses Austin's buried, and they have a thing on the wall of my 2 weeks in August prints up there, an
homage.
Far out, man.
Before we go to the next slide, just real quick, have a look at these sort of smoke cloud forms up here, and remember, the smoke and that really fabulous Baldung, which is Sabbath print. Again, that crazy hard diagonal that leads you around the whole print. It comes up consistently in Huck's work. The way he built his compositions, totally influenced by the old masters. Here we have another print that's in the exhibition from the Bloody Bucket series, which was a later series done about 7-8 years later.
It was done 99 to 2000 to 2005.
Right.
Around that, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at about close to a decade later then.
No?
Wait, we'll just look at the date.
I've lost track, man. I've lost track of all this.
Okay, so 5 years later.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it took, I don't know how long it took to do the Bloody Bucket. It took like, 5 years or something.
Yeah, you told me 2001 to 2005.
Yeah, something like that.
So we'll go with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the other day when we were in the galleries that Night, Death, and the Devil.
That's an
influenced-
exact.
Yeah.
Because I'm into, I like equestrian prints, guys writing stuff, or witches writing goats backwards. Because if you look in medieval prints, if you see a woman riding a goat backwards, that's a witch. And so I'm like, really?
Dürer did a really well-known print
Yeah.
of the subject
Yeah,
matter, right?
so cool.
Yeah.
So, but so it flips back and forth. My number one favorite print of all time is either Night, Death, and the Devil by Dürer, it's an engraving, or the Rhino. And I go back and forth. And it's usually when I see them in real life, the most recent is what oh God, I saw this great Night, Death, and the Devil at Print Week in New York, or a museum will have one somewhere that I see. But I love that, just the feel of it. And so I wanted to do a writers writing something that symbolized something, because, and so what I came up with was the Jolly Guano Brothers Ride Again, and it was about these two brothers who robbed a bank with cow pelvises on their head as the mask. And so I heard this for years, and they escaped on a Schwinn bicycle, like tandem, and a sheriff just like caught up with them, was like, pow, and they just, fell over into a ditch somewhere, and they arrested them. Well, I believed the tale of the robbery. That's easily proven. I didn't believe the cow pelvis thing, and so for years, and it didn't really matter whether I believed it or not. I was going to do a print about it. But one day, I was at a flea market or something, a thrift store, and they had some bones that people put these things in their gardens in Missouri, okay? And so I found there was a cow pelvis, and I was like, oh. And so I took it to the studio, and it sat around for a few days, and I was like, there's nobody here. I'm going to try this out. And so I took it, and your head fits exactly perfectly through the birthing canal, and then the hip socket holes line up with your eyes, and then if you want to be extra menacing, you flip it over, and then you put it on front of your face, and the eyes then are upwards evil looking, and you got horns. Like, it's true. Totally true.
You can Google that with his name and see a picture of him
Is
wearing
there?
it.
Somebody then came back and go, hey, look, it's real, and I put it on in my studio, and then, that picture's out there now.
Yeah.
It's totally true. It's like it opens up, like it goes like this, and then you've got this weird, like, Vader kind of mask on or something.
So, let's go to, I'm sorry we don't have an image with the lower panel. This is Electric Bologna-Land that's in the show. In the show, you see it with its fourth panel that goes beneath the three, and it kind of shows you what's going on underwater. So this is Huck's first, and you said you were never going to work on this scale again, so I'm guessing...
done, man.
Okay.
I'm not working this large again. It nearly killed me.
Yeah, I was going to say it's his first and only then chiaroscuro, monumental chiaroscuro woodcut triptych.
As Jen laughs at my wife's out there, she laughs as I say that. She's like, you wuss. I can't do that big anymore, man. But the reason that I work that large is because of Dürer. Because Dürer's prints in his day were big. Because up until that time, woodcuts were used to illustrate type. And they were like, you'd have a virgin and child or an animal of some sort, and they would just repeat that same image along with the type. It was a novelty thing. And when Dürer came along, he realized the potential of them being prints that you could distribute widely, but also the graphic quality needed to be what is called full sheet size. So they were huge. But he didn't have plywood. I have plywood. If Dürer would have had plywood, he'd have been working as large as I work now. So there's a size issue. He wanted to knock people on their ass with his imagery, that no one had seen anything like that before. And that's what I want to do. I want to just absolutely bowl people over with the size and the graphic quality and the technical quality of it and the narrative quality. And I want people to see something that they've never seen before. And people are usually familiar with prints, even though they don't know they are. A lot of people do a linoleum cut when they're in high school, or carve on the soft cut, the rubber cut. People have done that. And then, so when people see that, people know kind of what it is. You know, so that size, it's really about being a graphic entertainer too.
So this triptych is based on, we're looking at sort of, we're looking allegorically at what might happen at the traditional county fair, sort of exploring what you see as the dissolution of the small town.
And the loss of the
Right.
American innocence, you know. So county fairs, but also gun issues, violence issues in America, and the way that I sort of tied it in to what's contemporary. But this is also something from my childhood. So in 1982 or 83, I would go to the county fair. That was a big deal in Potosi. You know, that was a big gathering thing where you go and you see the petting zoo and you ride the rides and you play games. Well, you could, like, I've told this 100 times this week, but okay. You could go play a carnival game, you know, and they give you a ring and you throw it around a unicorn head. You'd win a samurai sword, a real one. You could win a bullwhip, a real bullwhip. You could win a Rambo knife, a real one. This is real. Or the most popular were Chinese throwing stars. They weren't the plastic ones that you can get now at Walmart or wherever. They were the real thing, and you throw them and they stick in the wall, or your brother, you know? And so kids were going home in rural areas one time a year armed to the teeth. And you think about it now, it's just as easy or easier to get a hold of this stuff. So that was my connection to bringing it to now, okay? And when I came up with the idea for Electric Baloney Land, I sometimes have titles before I'll have image, you know, and this title came from a couple of things that happened on a road trip to New Orleans where we were living off of bologna. We didn't have any money, as usual. We were living off bologna sandwiches, and then we stopped at this mega fireworks store called Boomland. Boomland, 20 miles. Boomland, see it, 5 miles. We're going to Boomland. We don't have any money, but we're going to Boomland. And we go to Boomland, and it's a super Walmart of fireworks, and there's one guy working there. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. So I saw that, and then we got really near New Orleans finally after 13 hours, eating tons of bologna sandwiches, having seen Boomland, and I'm thinking about all this stuff. And then we saw this glowing purple something on the horizon. We're like, what is that? And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we got closer, and you're like, this is going to be amazing, whatever it is. And we came up on it, and it was like the biggest used car lot in the world, is what they said, Larry's Electric Car Land. And I was like, God, you know, what a letdown. But it looked really cool. And then finally we're like 2 or 3 miles out of New Orleans, and there was a classic rock radio station playing Jimi Hendrix's Electric Ladyland all the way through. So I had all that in my head, and it's like Electric Baloney Land. And I had that title. And so I had the title. I sat on the title for about a year, and then I started drawing, and it just fit this. It fit this subject perfectly. So that's how I do these things. I come up with them from my experiences and my thoughts about contemporary society and the downfall of it, and my gripes and my complaints and my loves and my losses and all of that tied up into one just crazy ass, you know, scenario. You know.
I've got the Daumier Gargantua lithograph on the top right. This was what inspired, or one of the prints that inspired the left-hand panel, and you see the French monarch Louis Philippe. It's actually reversed from what we see in the in Electric Baloney Land. Instead, it's a conveyor belt that's, you know, bags of money are being taken from the lower classes and being eaten by the Louis Philippe, who was a pretty big guy.
Sound
himself.
familiar? Yeah, and so I took that. In every print that I make, I'm always referencing art and print history in some way.
Yeah, go.
I do that.
There's the central panel. So we can.
In every single print, I'm ripping off or thinking about somebody that came before me. And I tell this to people every single day that I go into the studio. I have to make prints that are as great as my heroes made. That's what I'm about. That's what I live my life for. And when I did my first print in college, I knew who Dürer was because I found his work when I was 13 years old. But it didn't hit me what a print was until I took a printmaking class. And so, in college. And so every day, that's what I'm trying to go for. I want to be part of that history, and I want to make print history. And take it very seriously. It's like when I found print all these great artists in printmaking, it was like finding members of my lost family. You know, Ancestry.com, whatever. I had mine on Jansen's Art History, man. You know, I had it all there.
So what we're looking at now is the central panel of Electric Bologna Land, and then the print on the left is The Martyrdom of St. Catherine by Albrecht Dürer, one of his early woodcuts. And this one, I was so pleased to find out that Pitts on campus had this print. It was a recent acquisition of theirs, and this print directly inspired that central panel, right? It was just kind of fate.
Her position, St. Catherine's position, she's a martyr. Well, so is Lady Liberty, you know, and her positioning of her arm, and they're back to back basically, and I was thinking about that the whole time. The earlier triptych, the one right before this called the Tommy Peepers, I totally took the center panel from Martin Schongauer's Temptation of St. Anthony. I totally did that. A singular figure surrounded and tormented by outer figures. And sometimes it only goes that far, but sometimes it gets a little more even in the spirit of the image. Yeah, it's not here. It's not in this slide. The bottom panel. It's downstairs in the galleries. It's what's going on underground. The center panel is Lady Liberty caught. Lady Liberty's a mermaid. Mermaids are temptresses and seductive. So is Lady Liberty. Okay, and so, but she's been caught at a noodling competition at the county fair. Does everyone know what noodling is? It's fishing with your bare hands. There's some reality TV show, Backwoods Noodling, and all this. And
No, there really is that show.
Yes. It may not be the title, but it should be. You know, and so I've seen it, and it's hillbillies doing bad stuff, and so or good stuff. She has been caught, and so in the fourth panel that runs underneath, it's called a predella. In the most traditional sense of altarpieces, because all these are really altarpieces, my big triptychs. It's the fish. It's this gigantic monstrosity fish that's being sought after next, after her. And so you can see, if you look downstairs, you can see her hands, the dog's head, and weaponry that's been shoved into the ground to get the fish. And on either side, it says 1 in a million, she's a beauty. That's a direct response. Well, I don't know who gets it, but the county fair I saw was in 1983. And so Lady Liberty, 1 in a million, she's a beauty. You better not take her for granted. She's 1 in a million girls. And that's like the Tubes. There's this band called The Tubes. They had this huge hit in 1983 with that, and it was one of my favorite songs growing up. It's still one of my favorite songs. It's great. It sounds good now. And I'm always looking for a way to get the year 1983 in my work. It was a big year for me. And if you look at the top of the shooting gallery called Assassination Station, but we changed the title here to the Troublemakers just because. And so up top it says "Shoot 'em up, heads of state." The "Shoot 'em up" lettering is Def Leppard's font. And so Pyromania came out in 1983. It's the first record that I bought with my own money. And so it fit perfect, like, you know, because there's a sign at the top of your carnival games that's garish and carnivalesque. And so Def Leppard, the whole thing. And then there's the target, that Pyromania was a gun target. So shoot 'em up, heads of state. So it all ties together neatly.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to do a tribute to Def Leppard somehow. Everybody knows them from like Pour Some Sugar on Me and stuff, but I like the earlier stuff, the more dangerous stuff.
Well, for my part, I have to say that this will be the only time that I was ever able to write about noodling in a museum label.
You think that's the
So,
only time?
I do.
You never know.
What I was really proud of was the fact that I just knew what it was. I guess, should I be proud of that? I don't know. But I hadn't talked with Huck about it, and I recognized the contest from my own experiences at county fairs.
My dealer, Jeff Hartz, he was here. I was telling him, he'll come into the studio and, what's this? You know, and I'll be like, it's Lady Liberty Hearts. And he's like, well, okay, what's going on? I go, it's a noodling competition. He says, what the hell is that? And it's like fishing with your hands. He's like, God, I hate country people. I was like, I'm a country person, Hearts. He's like, exactly. Yeah.
Did you have a high school or middle school art experience, and what was that like?
My middle school art experience was, her name's Mickey Colbeck. She lives in Vermont now. She's awesome. She was a total hippie. She was so cool. And she let me do whatever I want in class. But she got pregnant by my math teacher, and they fired her and kept him. Welcome to rural America. Okay? She was awesome. And then I got kicked out of high school art. I got kicked out of high school art because they stuck it the first day. My parents were like, oh, thank God, there's going to be art club for Tommy. There's going to be some structure for him. Thank God. And so I went to art club the first day of school, and we were doing color wheels. Well, my sister, who was in second grade, was doing color wheels. And I was like, come on, man. I asked him, I go, Mr. Smith, are we going to do color wheels all? And he was like, he got up and grabbed me by the ear, just like in the movies, and took me down the hall, and he sat me in the counselor's office. I was like, I don't want this Huck boy in any of my classes the rest of this time here. So I had study hall for 4 years. However, my mom, so I come home, and she's like, how was art today, Tommy? I was like, I got kicked out of art, Mom. They're like, what? And they yelled at the school. The school wouldn't budge, okay? So my mom, 2 days a week, drove me 30 minutes away and enrolled me in college classes at night. So I was getting like beginning drawing at the college level as a freshman in high school, and I did that. She drove me every night, like every 2 nights a week for 3 years. And I went in the summertime, and I did full-time in the summer. And so when I got out of high school, I had 68 credits of college, and I skipped my freshman year. So I had my MFA at 23, 22. I went straight through. But because my mom, there's my experience. I'm sorry, that's what she says. Thank you. Thank you. It's rough being in a small town, but I'm so lucky. My mom and my dad, they're all musicians and artists and everything. But my grandparents took me on a trip to Europe when I was in 1984, 1984, when I was just ready to go. And they took me. I got to see all this great stuff at a very young age. That's where I saw Dürer's Apocalypse the first time. And then my parents took me to the National Gallery of Art like 3 weeks later after I got home from Europe, and guess what was up? Dürer's Apocalypse. So, I've been very lucky. It wasn't like there was this scene at dinner where they're like, what are you going to do now, Tom? I'm going to be an artist. Oh, you have to be a doctor, you know. It was not that. It was like from the time I was 3, he's going to be an artist. And everybody made sure that that's what I had. I had what I needed. I'm very lucky.
Well, so you're a practicing artist, a successful practicing artist. You have your own studio. You have your own press. And we're really lucky now to have here today some of your apprentices, as you call them.
Yeah, well, we call them crew members, but they're really apprentices.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a thing at my shop where I like to help young artists.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't have an Evil Prince, that's the name of my shop. I didn't have that to go into when I was out of grad school. I didn't have that. So it's kind of part of the responsibility that I have out there as a working artist. And we have their work here. So we do little print fairs from time to time, and we're having one here. And the whole idea behind prints is that they're affordable, okay? And that they always have been for the common person. They're more affordable than anything else in the art world, really. And kids, prints by good printmakers that are young are a bargain. So you guys need to go buy cheap, good art from these kids who traveled all the way down here. You know, I'm not kidding. So,
No.
and it's a really cool thing to have them here at this, as one of them said, this is a fancy place, Huck. I don't know, you know, because we've shown everywhere. We've shown in bathrooms and rock clubs and now in museums too. So it was cool to be able to do an affordable print fair to sort of end this week, because that's the spirit of how I got started and what it's about, you know. So they all work at my shop for 2 years. Excuse me, 2 years, and then we kick them out and they go to grad school. They get into all the good grad schools now. So.
And the work is really incredible. So I hope everyone sticks around and has a look.
It's in here and out in the hallway, and also anyone who someone. Hey Nikki, can you bring one of those posters up here? So there's an official poster from the museum, which you should check out. They've got them around here somewhere. And then there's the bootleg poster that we did for this overall artist residency. And if you buy something, you get one of these, okay? So there's Dürer, and then there's my stuff, and then it's all. And this is a Dürer design that we riffed on. So yeah, pretty cool.
Should we open it up for questions so that we can, I know that we need to get out there. You probably
What time
need to
is
get, it's 5:05.
Okay.
Want to take some questions? You do it.
Far back than you. Okay, yeah. There are companies. Takish Press is the big company that makes all the presses for professional printmakers as well as schools that teach printmaking. There are different brands. There's French Tool, and then there's, there are a few companies that make the big equipment. I'm very happy to say this. Evil Prints, as of the last year, is a fully functional print shop. We can do everything. We can do etching. We can do lithography. We can do big woodcuts. I have a 4-foot by 8-foot custom press with skulls and flames on it. And if the thing works right and the batteries are in, a skull gear shift head on the crank that when you lower the pressure, the eyes blink red. It's really cool. I figured out a way to make a printmaking workshop combined with a tattoo shop combined with a 13-year-old's bedroom. Okay? But yeah, we do it all. We have these big presses, and they're a pain in the butt to move. So when you get one place, you stay there. And we're in downtown St. Louis. Next.
Well, firstly, I have to say, your work blows me away.
Thanks.
And I'm very grateful to your family because they're an example of, how you were nurtured to be so amazingly creative. I can see that your mind works, in a great way, but I'm wondering if there's any one particular place that you find
We're in St. Louis, man. Visiting artists and people that come to see me, we tell them the joke, you got to bring a bulletproof vest. I live in a very violent city. But I don't think there's one place. I think that it's an accumulation of people and an accumulation of places and an accumulation of history that I have up here. And so one thing's always relating to another thing. And I think it's just, it's in the air all the time. I don't know if I looked at things this way when I was a kid. I just have a real cynical, dark, humorous view of, of things. And man, this was planned. The Electric Bologna Land was planned before all of the last couple of years. And I'm a political junkie. It drives Jen, my wife, crazy because that's all I want on all the time, 24/7. I'll flip back and forth to things, and I'm just soaking in it all the time. And I even watch it when they start repeating stories. I'm like just hoping for some new boom, 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 breaking news. What's going on? I'm really bad about it. I've been that way since I was a kid, though. I'm a big fan of Watergate. I'm all the books on it, all that. Like, I would love to meet Woodward and Bernstein. That would be just like far out, I love that movie. It's like one of my favorite movies, All the President's Men. And so now it's like, come on, let's do this again. I want to live it because I was alive, but I was like 2 or something when it happened. So I'm in my element right now. I'll just admit it to you. I'm not literal with it in the work. So it's in the spirit of the age.
Are you planning a similar project for all of the ones who've been invited?
Oh, I thought about doing this whole series of prints called Tom Huck's Easy Targets. I thought about it. Maybe. I did a Michelle Bachmann print that's up in a poster that's up at the Schwartz Center.
In the Chase Gallery.
It's on a serpent. She's like on a serpent. It's on the Don't Tread on Me serpent, but it's her head. And I saw her on TV so many times, and she looks like a freaking snake. Like, any moment, like I'm watching, you think, oh my God, she's gonna vipe me, And so it was easy. Some things, they come real easy, And if Daumier were alive, he would be doing the same thing, Hogarth.
Hogarth too, yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the boot camp?
Oh, I do a woodcut boot camp every summer. Thanks for let me give a plug. I do this woodcut boot camp every summer. It's this really popular printmaking workshop where people come to St. Louis to live and work and study with me for a 10-day period, and they do a big woodcut. And I teach them how I do it. And my crew and assistants print all their work for them that week. So it's a big deal, man. It's cool. And it happens in July to August, 10 days, the end of July into early August. So yeah, you should all check it out. It's on the website. It's called Boot Camp on there. We've been doing it for 13 years. Any other? Anyone? Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Could you also mention that, so you brought JT with you, your master printer, and people can actually have an opportunity to print with him today?
Not him, Brian.
Brian, okay.
Brian, okay, it's getting confused, like my master printer's assistant, Brian. It's like getting knocked down the chain. Yeah, he's live printing posters out there for the Schwartz Center show. And those are commemorative. And there's a lot, they're free. Those posters are free. Okay? They're out there. They'll be printing you can see them printing. Okay?
All right, we're going to turn up the lights and open the windows so you can see the fabulous prints.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yes, thank you, everyone.